She told me her ex was in town and she was going to dinner with him for closure. I said, all right. When she got back at 3 a.m., her key no longer worked, and her bags were waiting outside with a note that read, "Closure granted. My name is Marcus. I am 36 and I work as a logistics supervisor for a regional distribution company in Charlotte. My days start early and end predictably. I bought my townhouse 5 years ago before I got married, and the mortgage and utilities are in my name. I handle most of the fixed expenses because my income is steady and structured. My wife is Andrea, 33. We have been married for 3 years and together for 5. She works in public relations for a hospitality group and works hybrid, part office, part home. We do not have kids. We split groceries and smaller bills, but the property itself is legally mine since I purchased it before we met. Andrea has always had a confrontational edge. In social settings, she is charismatic. At home, she is often critical. She corrects how I load the dishwasher, how I organize the garage, how I speak to her friends. I addressed it during our first year of marriage. I told her I would not tolerate constant belittling. She would apologize, adjust briefly, then revert. About 6 weeks ago, she told me her ex-boyfriend had reached out. They dated for 2 years before she met me. According to her, he was passing through Charlotte for work and wanted to meet to get closure. That was the word she used. She said it was mature to clear unresolved feelings. I asked what exactly needed resolving. She said it was just dinner and a conversation. When I pressed for more detail, she accused me of being insecure and controlling. That was a pattern. If I asked direct questions, she reframed it as a flaw in me. I told her I did not approve of the idea, but I was not going to physically prevent her from going to dinner. I also told her clearly that if boundaries were crossed, I would respond. She laughed and said I was overestimating my leverage. She booked the dinner for a Saturday night. She spent extra time getting ready. Not overly formal, but deliberate. Before leaving, she said she would be back by 11. She walked out at 7. Around 10:30, I texted her asking if everything was fine. She replied 20 minutes later, saying dinner ran long and they were still talking. No apology. No explanation beyond that. I responded with a simple okay. By 11:30, I called once. It rang out. She texted a few minutes later saying they moved to another place for drinks because they had more to discuss. She added that I needed to relax and stop hovering. That wording stood out. I had sent one text and made one call. At midnight, I stopped reaching out. I did not want a running argument over the phone. I stayed up, partly because I wanted to see how far this would go. Around 1:15, she posted an Instagram story. It was a dim restaurant table with 2 wine glasses and a caption about full circle moments. She knew I followed her. That was the first time I felt something shift from discomfort to clarity. Closure does not usually require multiple locations and social media documentation. She came home at 2:57 a.m. I know the exact time because my phone buzzed from the doorbell camera notification. I did not go downstairs. I watched the live feed from the bedroom. She looked irritated before she even reached the door. She tried her key twice. It did not turn. She stepped back and checked the handle like she assumed she had done something wrong. Then she tried again, harder. Earlier that night, after the Instagram post, I made a decision. I drove to a 24-hour hardware store, bought a new deadbolt set, and replaced it. The house is legally mine. There are no joint ownership documents. I confirmed that before making the change. I did not damage her belongings or block access to her personal property. I packed her clothes, toiletries, laptop, and basic essentials into 2 suitcases and placed them inside the garage. When she kept trying the key, I opened the garage remotely from my phone. The bags were positioned near the driveway. On top of one suitcase was an envelope with her name on it. The note inside was one sentence. Closure granted. She saw the garage door lift and walked toward it slowly. When she noticed the suitcases, she stopped and stared at them for several seconds. Then she looked up at the doorbell camera. She knew I could see her. My phone started ringing immediately. I let it go to voicemail. It rang 3 more times. Then the text started. At first, she said she was confused. Then the tone shifted. She called me unstable. She said I was humiliating her and that I needed to open the door before I made things worse for myself. I stayed upstairs and did not respond. After about 10 minutes, she started pounding on the front door. It was loud enough that I considered the neighbors. I went downstairs but did not unlock it. I spoke through the door and told her her essentials were in the garage and that we would talk during normal hours the next day. She yelled that it was her house too. I told her calmly that it was not legally in her name and that I had not withheld any of her belongings. I also told her she was free to call the police if she felt I had done something unlawful. There was a pause after that. Her voice dropped from anger to something more defensive. She said it was just dinner. I asked one question. Did closure require staying out until 3 in the morning and posting about full circle moments? She did not answer directly. She said I was insecure and punishing her for having a past. At that point, I decided there was nothing productive left to discuss. I told her we were done. I did not raise my voice. I simply said the marriage was over and that she should take her things and arrange somewhere else to stay permanently. I stepped away from the door, went upstairs, and blocked her number. I also blocked her on social media before she could continue sending messages. From the bedroom window, I watched her stand in the driveway for a few minutes, looking at her phone, probably realizing she could not reach me. She knocked once more, lighter this time, then stopped. She loaded the suitcases into her car without saying anything else and drove off around 3:20 in the morning. I turned off the exterior lights and went back upstairs. I slept about 2 hours. When my alarm went off at 6, I got up and followed my normal routine. Shower, coffee, out the door by 6:45. I did not call in sick and I did not text anyone about what happened. I wanted the next steps to be controlled and documented, not emotional. During my first break at work, I checked my email. She had already sent 3 messages from her work account. The tone was different from the night before. Less yelling, more accusation. She said I illegally evicted her. She said I would regret embarrassing her. She also said if I did not unblock her immediately, she would show up at the house again. I did not respond. Instead, I called a family law attorney during lunch and scheduled a consultation for the following morning. I explained that the property was purchased before marriage and solely titled in my name. The receptionist confirmed that as long as I had not destroyed her belongings or physically threatened her, I had not committed a criminal act by denying entry. That was the extent of advice until the formal meeting. Around 2 in the afternoon, my sister texted asking what was going on. Andrea had already contacted her. According to my sister, Andrea told people I locked her out for having dinner with a friend and was spiraling with jealousy. I gave my sister a brief summary and told her I would handle it privately. When I got home from work, the driveway was empty. No signs of her car. Inside, the house felt quieter than I expected. Not dramatic, just noticeably still. I changed the garage code and the Wi-Fi password that evening. I also removed her name from shared streaming accounts and transferred remaining joint utilities into autopay from my personal account only. It was administrative, not symbolic. At 9 that night, someone knocked on the door. I checked the camera before approaching it. It was not Andrea. It was her ex. I did not open the door immediately. I checked the camera feed again to be sure it was him. I had only seen him once in person years ago at a mutual event, but it was clearly the same guy. Early 30s, business casual, holding his phone like he was debating whether to call someone. He knocked again, lighter this time. I opened the door, but kept the screen locked. I asked what he wanted. He introduced himself unnecessarily and said he thought we should talk man to man. That phrasing alone told me enough about how he viewed the situation. I told him there was nothing to discuss. My issue was with my wife, not him. He said Andrea was distraught and that I overreacted. He claimed the dinner was innocent and that they just got carried away talking. I asked him one direct question. Did you know she told me she would be home by 11? He hesitated before answering. That pause was more informative than anything else he said. He admitted he knew she was married, but said he assumed I was fine with them meeting because she told him I was. That was new information. She had framed it to him as approved. I told him calmly that he was standing on private property and that whatever version of the marriage he had been told was incomplete. I also told him that if he wanted to help her, the best thing he could do was stay out of it. He stood there another few seconds, then said she was staying at his hotel because Lauren's apartment was small. That was the first time I felt something close to anger, not because she stayed somewhere else, but because she escalated immediately. I told him the marriage was over and that he did not need to involve himself further. Then I closed the door. Within 5 minutes, my phone buzzed from an unknown number. It was Andrea. I let the unknown number ring once, then sent it to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through from the same number. She said blocking her was immature and that we needed to talk like adults. I did not respond. Another message followed. She said she was at his hotel temporarily because she had nowhere else to go and that I forced her into that position. That was inaccurate. She has 2 close friends in the city and family 2 hours away. Staying with him was a choice. I replied once, briefly. I said all communication going forward would be through email regarding logistics only. No discussions about reconciliation. No emotional debates. Just practical separation details. She responded immediately, asking if I was serious about ending the marriage over one dinner. I answered that it was not about dinner. It was about staying out until 3, misrepresenting our agreement to him, and escalating to staying at his hotel the next night. Those were sequential decisions she made without hesitation. Her tone shifted again. She said I was trying to control the narrative and that if I filed for divorce, she would make sure people knew I locked her out in the middle of the night. I told her she was free to tell anyone she wanted. I also told her I had doorbell footage, timestamps, and screenshots of her posts if facts became necessary. She did not reply for almost an hour. Then she asked when she could pick up the rest of her things. That was the first practical question she had asked since this started. I told her Saturday at noon. I would have the remaining items boxed in the garage. I also told her I would have a friend present as a neutral witness to avoid accusations. She said bringing a witness was dramatic. I did not adjust the plan. The next morning I met with the attorney in person and began the paperwork. When I got home that afternoon, there was a long email waiting for me from Andrea. It was not an apology. The email was 3 pages long. It was structured like a defense statement. She said I had been distant for months. She said my work hours made her feel alone. She said the dinner was about clarity because she never felt fully heard in our marriage. What stood out was what she did not deny. She did not deny staying at his hotel. She did not deny telling him I was comfortable with the dinner. She reframed those as reactions to my behavior. She also wrote that I embarrassed her by locking her out and that any rational husband would have waited to discuss things privately. According to her, my decision proved I was unstable. I read it once and did not respond emotionally. I replied with 4 sentences. I said I acknowledged her perspective. I said the marriage no longer met my standards for trust. I confirmed Saturday at noon for her remaining belongings. I told her future communication should remain focused on legal separation. She responded 30 minutes later asking if I was really going through with divorce paperwork. I said yes. Saturday came. My friend Caleb arrived at 11:30 and stayed in the living room while I moved the last of her clothes, shoes, and office supplies into labeled boxes in the garage. I did not touch her personal documents. Those were placed in a separate folder for her to take directly. She pulled into the driveway exactly at noon. The ex was driving. That was intentional. She wanted a reaction. I opened the garage before she could knock. Caleb stayed visible but silent inside the house. Andrea walked in without greeting me. She scanned the boxes like she expected something to be missing. I told her everything was accounted for and that if she believed something was left behind, she could email a list. She said I was cold. I said this was procedural. While she was loading the last box into the trunk, she asked if there was really no path back from this. I told her no. She stood there for a few seconds after I said no. Not shocked. More like she was recalculating. Then she asked if I was doing this to prove a point. I told her I was doing it because trust is binary for me. Once it shifts, I do not negotiate it back into place. She said nothing physical happened and that I was throwing away a marriage over pride. I responded that staying out until 3, misrepresenting our agreement to another man, and choosing to stay at his hotel the next night were not minor lapses. They were decisions. I make my own decisions based on patterns, not apologies. She tried one more angle. She said if I filed, it would complicate her job because people in her industry talk. That was the first time career optics entered the conversation. I told her I had not contacted her employer and had no intention of doing so. My focus was legal separation, not public damage. The ex stayed in the driver's seat the entire time. He did not get out again. That told me he understood he had already overstepped earlier in the week. Once the last box was loaded, I handed her the folder with her documents. Passport, birth certificate, a few financial statements. I had made copies of joint account records for my own files. That was standard procedure per the attorney. She asked if I was going to tell people what happened. I told her I would tell the truth if asked. Nothing more, nothing less. She got into the passenger seat and shut the door without another word. The car reversed out of the driveway slowly. There was no dramatic pause. Caleb stayed for another half hour. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. That evening, I finalized the retainer with the attorney and authorized him to file the petition Monday morning. On Sunday night, Andrea sent one more message. It was not about reconciliation. It was about money. Her message was direct. She asked how I planned to handle spousal support and whether I expected her to just start over with nothing. The wording suggested she assumed a payout. I forwarded the message to my attorney before responding. He called me the next morning and explained the likely range based on our state laws, length of marriage, and income difference. 3 years of marriage, no children, both employed. It was not the kind of situation that resulted in long-term support. Possibly temporary, possibly minimal. I replied to Andrea and said we would follow whatever the court determined. I did not negotiate through text. She pushed back and said she sacrificed career momentum for the marriage. That was not accurate. She had changed jobs once, but it was for a higher salary and better title. I did not debate it. I told her documentation would speak for itself. By Wednesday, she had hired her own attorney. That told me she understood this was moving forward. Her lawyer sent a formal request for temporary access to the house to retrieve any overlooked property. I agreed, with the condition that it be scheduled and supervised. Date set for the following week. In the meantime, mutual friends began reaching out carefully. Some asked if we were separated. Some had clearly heard her version first. I kept my responses simple. She went to dinner with her ex, stayed out until 3, then stayed at his hotel the next night. After that, I ended it. I did not editorialize. One friend mentioned that Andrea had been telling people I blindsided her. That part did not bother me. Anyone who needed more context could ask me directly. The temporary orders hearing was scheduled quickly. No theatrics, just paperwork and numbers. The judge reviewed income statements and assets, then made a decision. The temporary orders were straightforward. No one was awarded exclusive use of the house because it was premarital property in my name. There was no long-term spousal support granted. The judge ordered a short transitional payment for 3 months based on income difference, which my attorney had predicted. It was manageable and finite. Andrea did not look at me during the hearing. Her attorney did most of the talking. Mine focused on documentation, purchase date of the property, separate accounts prior to marriage, timeline of events. No emotional arguments were presented by either side. After the hearing, she approached me briefly in the hallway. She asked if I was satisfied. I told her this was not about satisfaction. It was about closing a situation that no longer worked. She said I could have handled that night differently. I said maybe. Then I left. Over the next 2 months, the divorce moved through the system without complication. Assets were divided according to records. There were no hidden accounts, no dramatic discoveries. The transitional payments were drafted automatically and ended exactly on schedule. I did not monitor her social media. I kept communication limited to legal channels. The house stayed quiet. My routine stayed the same. Work, gym, home. About 5 months after everything finalized, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she and the ex were no longer involved. I did not ask for details. What I learned from the situation was simple. When someone shows you how they handle boundaries, you respond once. You do not debate the pattern. You decide whether it fits your life or it does not. In my case, it did not.